So hello everyone, it's Thursday the 21st of May 2020 and this is the second triage meeting. Well, welcome everybody. And we're going to start off a little agenda. I'm going to say a first thing about time. Now we all recognize everyone's giving time freely. Elise said, you know, I've been very busy, I haven't done anything. Hey, I didn't turn up for the first month after saying I'd help. Did I, Wes? I disappeared for a bit. It was Christmas. I had a life to live, and that's perfectly. Right. That's the thing we've got to say. I think we've got to get enough of us so that this works, so that it's not a burden on any one person, because that's the whole point of this triage team. Because we saw what it was doing to one person, left one committer, one person maintaining the repo, and even the small things help because it means they don't have to watch it every day. They can go, okay, they've got my back. You know, they will just answer things and like keep it running whilst the maintainer or maintainers, you know, have lives too. So today I think we'd like to talk about just the first things we'd like to do. We've got Lincoln and Elise on about the first time you do anything and, you know, how simple it can be. So if we just talk about what labeling is, John's going to talk about that. That's a simple place to start. I just labeled things and talk to people to begin with. Over to you, John.
Well, yeah, let me see my list. I actually have an example. Brain. So yeah, we have labels. We have labels across the 3 different organizations. Most of what I want to talk about is kind of just like we should probably change them or update them or whatever. So the labels that I interact with the most are, and I'll talk about that link I dropped in chat in just a minute, but the labels I interact with the most are question, bug, discuss, awaiting for more info, and help wanted. We need to basically document this stuff a bit better. Obviously, some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Somebody asks a question, hit it with a question label. Once you're on the triage team, you'll have permissions to do that. There's a couple of repos where you don't have permissions. I just recently realized that, and that's mostly because we're not particularly. I guess we don't have commit rights or something. I was talking to Doug about it, but there's some repos that just we don't have permissions on, and that's intentional. So just don't worry about them.
If you need them, yeah. let Doug or myself know, because I thought we added the whole org and all the repos, so maybe I missed a few.
There's a couple, and the ones that I've encountered are essentially dead, or at least what I think would be dead. But I'll try to mark them down somewhere. But yeah, so I dropped a link. If you guys want to click it, you don't have to, but it links to an issue that Ryan triaged recently. It was just an example of somebody, you don't have to read this whole issue, but somebody came in, they asked a question on the Molter repo. Ryan hit it with an awaiting more info. I guess he probably should have hit it with a question too, but whatever, doesn't matter. And then you don't have to, so this is basically first touch triage. He hit it with an awaiting more info because he was saying, can you please add a minimal reproducible example? He explained a little bit about what that is, why we need it. And then about a month went by and he came back and said, I'm going to close this because I didn't hear anything back from anybody. So that's an example of an awaiting for more info is just, you know, like we need more information before we can move forward. And it's also a really good indicator that if we don't hear anything on this, we can probably go ahead and close it. If it's been a week, 2 weeks, depending on the issue, close it. We could probably add a question to this, but it's dead now, so it doesn't really matter. A lot of triage, like that's basically the simplest thing you can probably do for triage is just label stuff. If you see things coming in through either the notifications or some of those links I shared last time where you can filter by unlabeled issues, etc., it helps. I think that it'll become a lot more useful when we have a better system with our labels than we do right now, basically. Because the biggest ones they're almost like 80% are questions. And then we have a waiting for more info, etc. They're not super actionable right now. So I would love to be able to see them change. But point is that as people triage more, I'm sure that Ryan and Glenn and also David, who's been doing this longer, we probably have some ideas for some of the new ones we'd like to see added, which we can have a conversation about that now or at some other point or whatever. But yeah, my brain, like I said, is kind of oozed today. So if somebody else wants to, if anybody has anything else to say, or if I haven't strung together coherent words, please help.
No, this is good, John. Thank you. I think the labels, it's the good thing about even just going in and throwing a label on an issue is you're also communicating to the person who opened it. They might, look at it and realize, oh, hey, someone saw this. They added they view this as a question or a bug or waiting more info. And it's very helpful for yourself. Like I have a little process where when I throw labels on these things, like John sent through a link to like a way to filter GitHub issues that you've commented on. And you can say, show me everything I've commented on that's awaiting more info that's still open. And I'll literally just go through those, start at the bottom and work my way up. And if things have if something's awaiting more info and I've commented on it and it's been a week or two, it's fair to just kind of close it. So for us and them.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about this today, but we definitely, we should definitely clean up our issue or our labels, et cetera. We were talking about this at the meeting yesterday, the CC meeting, but I think that they were originally synced across all the organizations. So it should be in theory that all repos have the same set of labels. They have all the same basic ones that I've mentioned. But in the future, I would like to see them be more actionable. But Ryan's right. One of the reasons why we label stuff is it is an indication to people that there are people here. This someone saw it, which that's pretty good. It's a pretty good distinction there. Another one I didn't mention or I didn't talk much about is help wanted. That's a label that we have. It's nebulous about what that specifically means. What I usually do with a help wanted is most common is it'll be a docs. Someone will come in and say, this is missing in the docs, or this is wrong, or whatever. Basically, if someone has identified something that is super actionable, docs are always really actionable. I like to put a help wanted label on it because pretty much anybody could come by, and if they were just starting and they wanted to find something to do, they could filter by help wanted. So that's my criteria, is anywhere that people have said, yep, this is what should be done. Somebody should do it. Or if that's implied, then you can throw help wanted on it. And also if you're looking, it's not a great indication for people who are closer to the project of what needs to be done, but it's also like, if you find any help wanted, you want to do it, go for it. There's an example of a doc change that popped up in chat.
Yeah, so that's just an example. Usually I'd ask the person asking for the help to make a PR, but they seemed very hesitant. So I just said, I'll do it, and they commented on it. And when it gets pulled in, I'll go back to the person and go, perhaps you should think about coming in and lending a hand. And that's the sort of thing we should encourage. Each one of us can go out and get a few more people involved. But doing docs is one of the simplest ways when people say, I didn't understand, I read it and it didn't make sense. And as I've said, you don't need a whole bunch of technical skill to do that. Mostly, this is an established product. It mostly works. You can usually find examples, and mostly they're first-time users or people are just in a little bit of trouble. It's not often we have real errors. And people can move on to other projects within, the umbrella of the OpenJS Foundation, or lots of them, and they can move on to become repo captains. So that's one of the things we want people to encourage people to do, is once you're comfortable, and of course, I was very uncomfortable the first time, and David Ash was too, just saying to someone, no, you haven't provided enough information, I'm closing your request. If you yourself are not willing to provide me enough information to help you, then I will not help you. And I'm closing this as it's insufficient information. once you feel strong enough to do that, I think you're actually on the, and it is funny, a strange right to go through, but just to say no, if you only write 5 sentences and say Express is broken, and we say why, show me, and they don't come back, you just close it. And after you've done that a few times, you grow in confidence and you'll build up to raising PRs. And hopefully some of us will go on to actually maintain some of the repos. Be careful, size does not indicate complexity, as I've discovered.
Here's a good example of what he's talking about too. I just put a link into chat, which is linking to recently closed issues in Multer. Multer is one of our most active repos by probably an order of magnitude. You don't have to read through this, but just basically you might notice some themes in the titles, which are usually undefined. This isn't working. I'm trying to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This contributes a lot to the noise in the projects, which is part of the reason why we have triage. Almost not a single, well, I can't say not a single because I didn't read these all, but most of these are just people having user issues, problems using the library, which is fine, that's valid. But, like we could, not all these are labeled, a lot of them are old. There's a couple in here that are like, there's one that has like 67 comments, and it's just a very common file not uploading, but Multer not giving me any errors. And it's just 67 comments of people piling on with their own particular error. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on this kind of stuff, but like expect to see a lot of these things. Eventually through weeding through and like working through all this noise, there are legitimate issues that pop up. Those are exciting and whatnot. But a lot of it, especially on the popular repos like Session and Multer, get a lot of stuff like this, where people are just asking questions. And that, to me, points that we need better docs. So that's something that we're working on. I think David just opened up a PR, which I briefly looked at, to add an example to Multer. I have an issue open somewhere too, et cetera. But looking at all this stuff here, we can obviously say, well, here's the problems that people are having with Multer. So that tells us that now, oh, well, we should improve the documentation so that we can hopefully get less of these reports, but also so people can have an easier time using the project, which might be a nice little segue into something we can talk about just briefly, which will be, I dropped a link in the meeting. I can drop it in chat too, but we are just now starting to work on issue templates. Oops, that's not an actual link, unfortunately. But yes, issue templates. So some of this stuff will get automatically labeled. This is something that obviously we want help from the triagers in. We haven't landed anything yet, but it'll be a set of issue templates that'll go across all the different orgs. So they'll be in all the repos essentially.
Let's explain what a template is, though, because not everyone might know. So when they raise PRs or issues, we want a thin number of questions that says, can you tell us these things? For some very simple things like what version of Express is this a problem with? And what version of Node were you running? And do you have a simple example? Very basic thin stuff, because a lot of them in their hurry just dash off things, and then we just have to go back and ask for that basic stuff for things. So it's just a template when people raise issues. And the project of this maturity should have had one across the entire org, but it didn't. And now, as we're coming in, we're realizing that that's not a good thing. Back to you, John. Yeah,
so I'll drop a link if anybody's curious if they haven't encountered this in the wild. If you go to Gatsby on GitHub, Gatsby's JavaScript, React, static rendering. It's a popular thing. Sorry, brain. Click on new issue. If you follow that link, and you'll see you get choices, beautiful choices. So this will, if you click on, let's say, bug report, just for an example, there's comments already in here, which will not show up in your issue, but it gives you some instruction about like, this is what we want to see. We're going to, for our issue templates, we're going to try to be really lean at first, but this is just an example of what an issue template would look like, to give some prompting for people about, if you're filing a bug report, this is what we want to hear from you. But also, back on that issue choosing thing, there's links, Gatsby documentation, Gatsby Discord. I'm excited about that because, say, for Multer, we could have an option which is like, is your file undefined? Click here, and then we could jump people straight to documentation for the most common issues, which is good for us in terms of less issues, but also it's great for the user. If, you know, if 80% of the issues are with a specific problem, hopefully when they go to open an issue, we can direct them to the documentation. So I'm really excited about that stuff. So agenda-wise, like I was saying, I didn't have much on here, and also I can rant and talk for.
No, it did. So
I'm gonna.
Is everyone,
I'm gonna cede the.
One thing I was gonna ask for everyone is does everyone kind of understand the different orgs? We kind of talked on it briefly last meeting. But I'd be happy to like walk through the 3 different orgs that are kind of under the Express umbrella and talk about the differences and like what they are. I don't know if that would be helpful, or if everyone has a good understanding of those and what they are, like we don't need to do that. But it took me a little while to wrap my head around, and some explanation from Doug as well, like what each one was and the general purpose of the repos under each org. And I found it helpful.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm super into that idea, and I would suggest maybe jump straight into the Express itself repo, and maybe like dive into some of the files, and then follow go into request and find some of the smaller pieces of functionality that are packages, etc. So
so if everyone wants to go to, if you just look at the package, I'll put it in the chat, the package.json of the actual Express repo.
Do you want to just share your screen or something?
Yeah, I tried, and it said host disabled, attendees sharing screen. Glenn.
Oops, hang on. It means I've got to figure something out. Hang on. Participants, what can I do to you? Ryan, I've clicked on Ryan. More, make host.
Oh, wow.
There you go, you're host.
Okay. Wow.
I think you can also turn it on for everyone if you need to, but host works as well.
Okay. Can everyone see my computer, my screen?
We can.
Yeah, I can. Yep.
It's very portrait mode, but yes.
Okay, let me, oh, sorry, 1 second. All right, is that better?
Yep.
Yep, much better.
Okay, good. So you're looking at the Express package.json, right? Great. So this is just the package.json of Express, and there are all these dependencies here, right? And Express really is like the actual Express repo is actually kind of small, and most of it is made up of these various packages. So these packages are pretty much all coming from various organizations under Express. So these all are very popular packages because they're dependencies of Express, and Express is a very popular package. So sometimes someone will open an issue in the Express repo, and it'll maybe get transferred to one of these repos, or someone will say, hey, actually open the issue here, or there's an issue already open in one of these packages. So we can take something like, let's take cookie, for example. Okay, so this is a dependency of Express. And so if I,
That's why I love my Octo linker Chrome extension, because it gives you a link in package.json. You click the name and it opens the repo automatically.
oh, wow. Yeah, I need that.
It's on my hot tips list.
I need that, yeah. So this opens up now. So we're now in the cookie dependency, which is in the JS HTTP org. And this org is one of the 3 that are considered like under the Express umbrella, if you will. And so cookie is, this is a very I'm not going to say simple, but it's a module that is really in like classic Node fashion, only does a few things and does them very well, and is a HTTP cookie parser and serializer for HTTP servers. So this repo sometimes gets issues where people are trying to use this in the browser or this and that, and it really is simply a module that parses strings and looks at cookie headers on a Node server, and it's what Express uses to parse and serialize cookie headers. And so this is an example of something that's in the JS HTTP org. And the JS HTTP org is, per the description, like low-level HTTP related modules. And most of the things in here like operate on strings. It's really talking, or like we're looking at like HTTP headers or various things related to the HTTP protocol itself that Express and other packages use. So these are all fairly simple modules, and if you look, most of them don't have a ton of issues or PRs open because they work on the HTTP protocol, and it's very, like there's not a ton going on in most of these. But if you find like low-level HTTP stuff interesting, you might get a kick out of going through some of these modules.
Also real quick, Ryan, Wes, maybe you can briefly touch on this, but it's not just Express that uses some of this stuff. A lot of these things are made so that anybody could cobble them together or use it to create their own framework. So they're not just for Express, but that's part of why they're so important, is that they're used by more than just Express as well.
Yeah, if you all are familiar with Koa, one of the reasons why these three orgs, the two other orgs, the non-Express.js org, exist is because when that was being written, a bunch of things that were going to be shared got broken out into these different orgs. Since then, it's grown way beyond just that. I mean, if you, there's a website that does like a nice little visualization of your of what other popular packages depend on you. And if you go through basically any of those JS HTTP ones, you'll find like a ton of other really popular libraries.
Yeah, JS HTTP ones, I was really amazed when I started looking through JS HTTP because it was something I literally had never heard of before, like that org. And I started looking through the repos, and I was like, these sound familiar. And then I started looking through like the NPM downloads, and it was just, I was like, wow, this is like one of those things that is the backbone of so many popular modules out there that you've never heard of.
Yeah. So
really
my favorite example is on line 49 on his screen right there, path to regexp.
Yeah.
That is
right here.
I think that's probably the most underrated package in NPM. So path to regexp is what we adapt it, or Express's router adapts it in order to use. So like when you do /test or / like whatever :ID, for dynamic parameters in your Express URL, it's path to regexp that's doing that matching, or is providing a regexpress matching. But if you've ever used React Router, it also uses path to regexp for the same thing. So this one package is a core dependency of 3,000 other packages, and together it gets millions and millions and millions of downloads. And Blake Embray is the gentleman.
5 million. 5 million packages use it. Like if you use a router, whether it's on like a node router or a client-side router, chances are it uses this package. I've pretty much, I think every router I've come across when I've looked through the source code of dependencies uses path to regexp, like every single one.
There are now some notable exceptions, but yes, I agree. Fastify doesn't. So Find My Way is a router that I think was originally built for Restify. I don't know. It was built for one of the other ones that has gained a bit of traction because it's using tree routing, which is faster in a lot of cases than regex routing. Anyway, sort of a tangent, but yes.
To toot my own horn, and to give context to why I like doing this work, you see, it says John Church. This is the most recent commit on path to regexp. Somebody opened up an issue that was like, "Hey, why did the bundle size change?" And I looked into it. I was like, "I don't know." I looked into it, and there was a mistake in the TypeScript bundling. So with one PR, I reduced the size of this package by like 30%. It's now 1/3 the size or something, which if you do the math, that's basically gigabytes per year saved across the web. It's kind of, I mean, it was a trivial PR, whatever, but that blew my mind. Basically, that's one of the things that keeps me motivated. I was like, wow, oh my God, nobody else found this, but one person opened up an issue.
You single-handedly saved like 0.0001% of global warming. So think about that. That's good stuff.
So this Parser regex is in the Pillar.js org, and so if you look at the three orgs, it's JS HTTP is like the most like the way I think about it. JS HTTP is like the kind of the more like lower level things where it's operating mostly on strings, really handling just HTTP protocol based things, and then one level above that is Pillar.js, and Pillar.js, as it says in the description here, is like bring your own HTTP framework. So Pillar.js has a ton of really useful packages in it that do a bit more on top of a lot of JS HTTP modules, and people use Pillar.js packages to build not only Express, but like Wes mentioned, Koa and probably a lot of other like frameworks out there. And so Pillar.js is used, is a bit more like modules that people can build. If you're looking to build like a new HTTP framework for Node for some reason, if you're looking to do that, you may go into Pillar.js and look around, see what they have. And the next level above that is really just the Express org itself.
I was also going to add one thing that I usually, if I'm thinking of, I have a thing that I want to do and I'm not sure I need Express right away, when I'm looking for a module to do the thing, the way I usually do it is I start in Pillar and I look and I say, I think that is the one that I need. And if not, if I don't find something I'm looking for, I'll drop then down to JS HTTP. Because oftentimes, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's see, Send, actually. Well, So Send, I think, is actually a slightly lower. So there's serve static. And that's in the Express repo. So serve static is sort of the highest level interface. So that's what you would use as an Express middleware. The step below serve static is Send. And then Send uses a bunch of things from JS HTTP. Is that like that kind of hierarchy?
Yeah, and you can see Send is also used by 5 million something packages.
Yeah, I think that's like a direct dependency of Webpack dev server.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this probably, well, a lot of this is overwhelming. Essentially, it can be. It is. Let's put it that way. But the good thing about it took me a really long time to understand why Express does this, and I'm not sure that I fully. But that's a whole other topic. But for Triage and a contributor, it's actually pretty cool because there's things in the orgs that I just don't understand. A lot of them that I don't understand, but you can become because the projects are so focused. You can actually you can deep dive into one of them and actually really understand it. And because they're fairly focused a lot of times, there's not a whole lot going on. So they're not that difficult to grok. If you think about it as terms of what does this package do and what is the API, et cetera, et cetera. So you can learn them piece by piece. No one needs to learn all of them at all. But you can basically find something that interests you or you just want to learn more about, and you can become an expert essentially on that thing.
Yeah. I don't want to stay too long on this, but I just wanted to show this one PR that actually I opened this when shortly after I first started triaging. I was looking through the JS HTTP repos, and it was really piquing my interest because I found it just very interesting. It was a lot of just learning about things I never really knew about the HTTP protocol. And I came across in the cookie module, an issue here that someone had opened. I'll add this in the chat. in the chat a second. But essentially, this PR I opened, and I was like, hey, you know, people have been saying they want this feature out of this module. And it was like, I want to, and Wes, I think he commented on it at some point, but it was like, hey, I want to be able to serialize multiple cookies at once and make that like a nice thing in this module. And I was like, oh, that seems reasonable. There was a PR that was open for this that seemed a little, either I think there was some issues with it and it seemed like not super active. So I was like, let me take this and kind of do something with it. And Doug had some comments, and through this conversation here, Doug brought up some good points, and so did Wes. And I think Wes, you ended up opening like an issue in the Node group or something like that. But
so
this was really helpful for me when I first started. I was like, and Doug and Wes's comments were like really helpful. But Doug, somewhere in this thread, is like, the JS HTTP repos are mainly for, you know, parsing strings and working on like lower level HTTP things, and this is a additional functionality on top of that, and this may not be the appropriate place for it. And you brought up a good point about like Node might need to change something or add something, and it's still open, but it's very
so I'll tell you why it's still open, because this particular PR is the starting conversation, which may hopefully result in a total rewrite of the Node core HTTP header API. So good job, great conversation to start, because what it led to was on the HTTP frameworks team, I started an issue specifically talking about setting the cookie header stuff. Yeah, here. And we brought it up on some of the other framework maintainers, and Mateo from Fastify and Node Core and a bunch of other things went and described a little bit of what he went through doing Fastify's HTTP header stuff, and had a lot of complaints about it. And a lot of it centered around the same kind of things we were having here and why that PR didn't land. And it's really not, like, the API is a good one for the end user. The problem is that putting it in that package is overly complicated and really not where it should live. And what we need is really a better set of header primitives in Node. So this PR, and this is where this kind of work I think is really interesting, because, you know, it might not be obvious at first when you say, oh, that sparked my interest, but it turns out like sometimes this can have far-reaching changes, right? Like when we, as the team representing Express, come in and say, look, we're struggling with this API in Node Core. It's not quite fitting what we need for this particular use case. Like, that holds a lot of weight when we have those discussions, and especially if, like, again, Fastify's maintainers come in and say, yeah, we agree. What it results in is like wide community changes, with like really high impact. So this particular PR is, I think, a great example of how, the triage team can really affect like wide sweeping change. It's really good.
Yeah. And so I'll stop, but I want to open up, like, if anyone on the call has any questions about the 3 orgs. I wanted to just like overview them and bring it up. Like, I was like maybe a month into opening, like triaging, when I made this PR. I thought it was like, I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is really simple. This should be able to land. And then a whole conversation ensued that really taught me a lot about how these projects are run, and it was super helpful. So don't be afraid when you're doing this triage stuff. If something piques your interest when you're looking through these packages, dive in if you want. You don't have to, but it's a great opportunity to kind of do that if you want.
And I'll also add real quick, on that PR, I'm not sure the number of, I'm looking at it right now. I can tell you probably. I'm not sure how many comments there are on this. I can tell you, I guess. Yeah, there's 20 comments or something on this PR. That's common in a lot of ways with Express. If you do open up a PR, I see this happen all the time. Doug will make a comment and people will go, okay, well, I'll change that. And he's like, no, I'm not saying you should change it. It's just, there's a lot of discussion and back and forth on every PR essentially. Is that the best way? I have no idea, but in the org, people seem to be really we like to discuss stuff. We're pretty chatty with these things. So if you do open up a PR, expect that, I guess, and take it as just thinking out loud. The pace of change is slow with most of these things. And hopefully you can understand a little bit about why that is now, seeing some of the context. Changing an API for one of those core things could potentially break or change or drastically have ripples across the entire ecosystem. It's kind of weird. And luckily Doug is like a really good steward, so it's unlikely that you're going to break something yourself. But that's part of the reason why the pace of change is so slow, is that those packages do very specific things. And if they're going to change something in a new version or whatever, it potentially should be backwards compatible. And if it's not going to be backwards compatible, it could have wide-ranging effects, essentially. So that's part of the reason why things are slow. Also, it's just,
I will say
part
of Doug's. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Ryan, please don't forget to share the link to the PR.
I think
Yes, I'll do that now. Sorry, I had two monitors going and have not used Zoom a ton.
I've got the link to the PR and also to that issue that he was talking about, but the PR link just hit the chat.
So for what it's worth, just to also talk a little bit about this point of the pace. So some of the reasons why the breaking things has been really difficult for us in the past is the maintenance burden of releasing a breaking change is significantly higher than the maintenance burden of continuing to not break people, right? So when we didn't have a robust triage effort, if we accidentally broke somebody, it meant like we were frantically responding to issues on GitHub and it was a lot of work, and then we'd have used up whatever time we had to work on the project for that day and wouldn't get to other things, right? I think the goal would be that as we move forward and have more people like you all, we're going to be a lot more effective at looking at what are the right breaking changes to make in the future. And the hope will be that unblocks a big potential that we've been sort of unfortunately not able to do, which is keep up with some of the big advancements in the Node ecosystem. There's a bunch of idea PRs that I just haven't even worked on because I haven't had time to do them. Like, for example, there's one thing that landed in HTTP core is the ability to pass in a request and a response prototype to the server, right? So what we do in Express is we actually replace the prototype of the request response with our prototype, right? And that's how you get all those sugar methods on RecRes. Well, that's pretty inefficient. Like I did some benchmarks and it's like quite a bit slower than having the right prototype in the first place. And Node has this, and they landed at, I think, in 10, but Express hasn't been able to capitalize on that because it would be a breaking change, right? And the reason why we don't make those sort of smaller, and I say this is a smaller breaking change because it wouldn't really affect a lot of end users, but the ones it would affect would be totally broken. The reason we don't do that is because we don't have the time, right? Like the engineering effort has not been available. So as we move forward with this team, I think it's going to unlock a lot more ability to take on those breaking changes, which really opens up the opportunity for you all to step up and say, no, there's a better API here. Like, I'm going to submit this PR and I'm going to try to push it through, which in the past, and I'm sorry, Ryan, that your PR is sat there for a while, but like, these are sometimes harder things to do, even if they might be the right thing, just because of the, state of the number of people supporting a, hundreds of thousands of web apps via Expresses. It's not proportional.
Yeah. And I mean, to be clear, for that particular PR, I was considering just closing it because I was like, okay, I see there's a much larger discussion happening. And I've just kept it open because, someone I can eventually or someone else might, but I think making a little part in opening up that discussion is a pretty incredible thing to see from like someone who kind of started, with the project fairly recently. And it's, it just shows like the impact these things have. I went into that being like, oh, like a little API change in this library, like it's a very popular library, but it's not breaking. It's a backwards compatible change in that it's like a new thing added, not changing what's there. And it just opened my mind to like the scale at which this stuff operates is pretty neat.
Has there ever been a change that broke something in production, and was it resolved?
Many. Yeah, some things. So in the past few years, it's been so stable that a lot of the things that have broken have been Node releasing a change, which has broken Express, and that's broken a lot of production applications. I'm trying to think through the last.
I think rec-res might have happened, or so there's a PR that I forget. There's something that got rolled back recently, like in 4.17. We pulled something. I don't know what it was specifically, but we moved an internal file.
Oh, well, that definitely breaks people.
So you shouldn't do this, but sometimes people will require Express / rec, or like what I call deep requiring. They'll pull a file out of the actual node module package instead of using the API that's exposed. And that's not technically something you should do, but if Express you can do it. If Express changes it, you break people. Yeah. So that happened recently, and then Doug had to roll it back, I think.
Yeah, another one that was definitely a breaking change that got reverted was the status null. So when 4 was released, status, you could pass null, which is just like invalid. Like it just doesn't even make sense, right? But people were using this because they use everything. They offer
checking the value.
Yeah. So what they were doing was they were saying at the beginning of the request cycle, they were saying status null. And when they set some key thing in their application logic that said, now I've established, I've handled this, they would set status to 200. So 200 is default, null is invalid. But because we allowed null, people started using that as like an application control flow. So they could say like, if status is null, then like, I haven't handled it yet, maybe handle it. So we thought this was a bug that we'd be able to change and just, release as a normal patch. But it turned out it broke a ton of people, like not just a few, quite a few people came in with issues as soon as that release went out. So that one got reverted.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and those are harder ones to detect because if it's in an application, you may have like, it's not like our tests would fail, right? It's not like your test might even fail. You might just have weird application behavior because of that, because you get a response that is different than you expected.
Right. Yeah, but because of the different many use cases, like you said, like that, you don't know how to test it efficiently. Yeah.
And there's a lot of argument for you don't want to ever test everything 100%, right? Like this one, I think we did add a regression test for, but also it was a bug, right? Like it was actually unintended behavior. So like that's one of the breaking changes going out in 5 is like resolving the bug, but it has to go out as a major. And since we had like a much slower major cadence, we never got, it's been there for years. So.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay.
And I imagine, and one thing I will say is once we actually drop 5 and release it as latest, there's going to be a lot of work for people. People are going to come in with all sorts of weird things, and it might even be things that are already documented that are broken, but there's going to be a ton of people coming in saying, my route broke because I had a regex in it, and the regex used dot, and now that's not valid because now you have to do parentheses dot, right? Like that's one of the breaking changes in 5. So there's going to be a lot of you broke production for me type of issues coming up real soon.
I'll be excited.
Okay, folks.
We don't. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
No. I was going to just say we've got 10 more minutes. I just wanted to keep track on time.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, we still don't really know exactly when V5 will come out. Soonish has been the thing for a while. We'll see. But in the meantime, I'm going to try and publish. I have a list already privately. I'm going to try to make it public of just projects and things that need a champion or need to be done. If you want to do something besides just labeling issues and responding to people, by combing through and by being extremely online these past couple of months, I've found a lot of projects that we said we're going to work on, but we haven't been able to. So I would love to be able to share that with anybody, just a public list of like, here's things that are in progress that need some help or need somebody to get it over the finish line.
I want to share that link to docs. You documented the Express 5 changes. You had a nice doc you shared last night. Do you want to share that again in the chat, John?
Yeah, definitely. And I would love to see this. So I've been meaning to figure out how to incorporate the status board into the website, but I would love to see this list on the website somewhere. I think the status board would be a reasonable place to keep it because that's intentionally supposed to be active work, right? Like things that are ongoing in the ecosystem. So if there was like a way we could put like it's just a GitHub Pages site. So if you wanted like take your list, turn it into Markdown, PR it to the status board, and then all we have to do is copy the HTML into a spot in the like static output. GitHub Pages would just serve that, and then we would have like a nice shared resource moving forward. I think that'd be a valuable thing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I like I said, I have a private list, and I realize there's no reason why it shouldn't be public. So.
Yeah, and I really think one of my goals is to have this stuff prominently featured on the website. Like, the website gets tons of traffic, and for a long time, especially because there was less contributors, featuring all the good work that people were doing wasn't really a priority. But I think now that we're expanding that, I think making sure people know that there are folks working on it, that those folks get recognition for all of their hard work, like that kind of stuff, I think is really important. And I think when I gave the talk that sort of kicked a lot of this stuff off, I think I said like I want 2020 to be like the year of like the community around Express. And so I see like giving recognition to all the people like you all on this call, like for the work you're doing is part of having a thriving community. If everybody's just toiling in their basement and, no one knows who you are, that you're doing great work, like the value is a little bit lower to you maybe, as I know it is to me, like that part of it is, maybe a bit vain, but it's nice to see, your name on some good piece of work, I think that's valuable. I think the website would be a great place to really like highlight that. So if there's anybody who has ideas on how we can, better do that, if there's a section, if we want to make a page called Triage on the website that like lists all the active Triage members and shows, stuff that they could work on, especially if we have like a list of things to do, I think that would be another awesome contribution.
So we are almost at time, but does anybody want to add anything or ask any questions about literally anything?
So Wes, how long have you been doing this?
6 years maybe.
Wow.
On Express, you mean working on Express, right?
Yeah.
I think about 6 years. I wasn't super active in the first couple of years. I was just doing oddball things. So like, I think one of the first things that I really pushed was, I was working at a company where we did isomorphic, it was the early days of React, but it was like isomorphic React apps, and we were Express on the back end. And this was before React Router. This was before like Redux. So we sort of had our own solution. And what our solution was is I had taken the Express router and made it run in the front end. So one of the like very earliest things I did was like, hey, can we like advertise what browser support some of our modules have? Like a lot of them run perfectly fine in the browser. We just don't tell people they do. The router was the one that I had been working on at the time. And so I sort of was just here and there. I think I was attending the TC meetings, but totally as an observer, so I think it wasn't until maybe 4 years ago or so that 3 or 4 years ago that I started like trying to drive initiatives. So.
And that was what made you start contributing to the Express community?
So actually, if you haven't seen, the talk I gave in December sort of talks a little bit about my history there. Actually, I saw that it was Doug doing like everything, and it really worried me because my entire company's startup was entirely on top of Express, and I was like, well, if Doug decides not to anymore, like we're going to be really in trouble. And so that's what really spurred me to say, like, no, I need to understand what's going on here, because if that rug gets pulled out from under us, it's either going to be a huge amount of effort to migrate, or we're going to have problems. So that's what really made me think about getting more involved. That was around that time. There was also like, because IBM was getting involved because they had bought Strong Loop, but like it wasn't really working well. So there was some like contention there, and like there was actually a moment where Express almost got deleted, like the NPM package almost got unpublished. And that was like quite a wake up call to me, like this needs more people.
If you haven't seen Wes's talk, I'll drop a link to it in the meeting issue. It's good. I want to ask Wes a question, but first, if anybody else has another question, feel free.
I was just going to ask a very brief, like I'm going to throw an issue from Cores into the chat, and just to look at it, it's been stale. It says it's open, but like what would be the ideal scenario for like how you would want a triager to just go through these issues? Would you say ask for follow-up at the bottom? It's short, so we should be able to scan it quickly. And then if you don't get anything, you would just close it?
Yes.
Cool.
I'm scanning it.
Just
it right
to
now,
double check, because like I don't want to close things prematurely if there is some discussion or there's a history there, and I just like this just looks stale. Just follow up, just close it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, feel free to be like, does anybody have anything else to offer? And then you can always close it later if you'd like.
And
good question.
Don't want to have to go back. It is perfectly acceptable to say, since this hasn't seen any activity, I'm going to close. Feel free to. And if nobody should be offended by that. It's a perfectly acceptable thing.
Okay, cool.
And
someone said at some
cares,
point,
someone
said it, like I think it was either Wes or Doug said at some point in a meeting, reopening an issue is very cheap. So you can go in, you can say, like, looks like there's no activity, give your very valid reason for closing this. If someone in this issue feels strongly enough that they're like, well, actually, I'm working on something or whatever, want to reopen it, it's a button away. Like,
okay, cool. So you don't have to like make some calendar appointment for
like
yourself, like check on it
forever from anyone. You're just closing it.
Great.
Yeah, still easy to find. So.
Cool.
And another triager, if you don't get to another triager, might be like, okay, a week's gone by, they asked for an update and we didn't get one, so let's close it.
Okay.
But so in the last couple of minutes,
label it though. If you do that, it's very important. If you do label it like awaiting more info or something, so it's very easy for us to surface that. Yeah.
Great.
Wes, do you want to maybe give a 2-minute plug for the Node.js package maintenance working group?
Yeah.
Which I will drop a link to in chat.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of this started there. So if this kind of work is really interesting to you, this was now a while ago, 2 years ago or so, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Some of this stuff was like with Express was really starting to weigh on me. Like we don't have enough time to push these things forward. We need more people. How do we get more people? So I reached out to a couple of folks. Tierney from Microsoft, I think, was one of the first people fairly active he's a DevRel, so always on Twitter and active in the community. And so I said, hey, like we need to do something. I'm looking for like what opportunities people have to collaborate. And right at that time, Michael Dawson had apparently been fielding an idea in Node Core for like a group just to like talk about what it takes to maintain packages in our ecosystem. What ways can we improve that? Maybe there's things in Node Core that could help improve that. There's a lot of ideas. The very first like week when it opened, we had like 100 people step up and be like, I want to be a member and here's my idea. And we had like a huge influx of issues because it was a really topical, like something had happened in the ecosystem at the time. I don't know if it was a module that talked about, what was it?
Was it the ESLint one? I can't remember.
That sounds familiar. Maybe it was, yeah. That might be
left pad.
It was after left pad. I know for a fact.
I think it's, yes, somebody stole some. Didn't they get someone's password?
Yes. There was a package that is a dependency of probably ESLint, one of these larger ones that got handed off, and the ownership was just basically sold to the highest bidder. Anyway, a big deal. Turned out ended up fine, but like everybody got really worried about it, so there was a lot of activity. Anyway, it settled down quite a bit, but Express's triage group specifically got started as a discussion in the package maintenance working group. So we were thinking of ways we can better support packages, and we decided to have a 3-phase sort of approach, which we have never really exited the first phase, but you know, that's how it goes. And the first phase was like pick a couple of pilot partners who have representatives on the package maintenance working group and in their respective communities to then build out programs to help module authors and you know, ecosystems like this do better. So I volunteered Express, and Jaresh was like one of the very first people who really got on board with it. He and Michael and I, Michael being the one who runs most of the effort on the package maintenance working group, got together and said, like, what would this look like? So we went over all our different problems that we were facing, and that now today is sort of what we have with the triage group. But we're doing a ton of other activities. So the idea is anything that seems like it would help module authors do their work more efficiently, if there's better ways to migrate them from, so like, for example, right now we're working on, Node Core is working on the exports. So in package.json, you can say exports and give it like keys and files. So if you want to do like deep linking, like Jonathan was saying, into a package where you do like require express/request, you don't actually necessarily have to do express/lib/request. We can say we export and then give that key as a path to a file. Well, there's some problems with it because it's all or nothing. As soon as you define that, you can't deep link to anything unless it's in that object, right? So like that's causing some problems because people require package JSONs out of people's packages all the time, right? And anyway, it's stuff like that where the package maintenance working group is sort of a representative to Node and to a bunch of these other projects, trying to make sure that things go smoothly for package authors. So like if there's a way that we could get package authors to include exports more reasonably, right? Like if we need to give them a little tool that they run on their command line that says, do you want to opt out of exporting your package JSON and default it to no, because most people want to export their package JSON? Like that's the kind of stuff where the package maintenance working group really shines. So we've got, so I guess Glenn, and who else is on the, Jonathan, you just recently, I think, joined, right? And who else, is anybody else on the package maintenance working group? No? Okay. And then I know Jaresh is, and are there any other triagers who are over there? Not yet.
It's open to anyone interested. Everything is.
Yeah, but it's really interesting work, and it's really a nice way to get involved. Similar to, so Express has more like targeted goals. If you have just a general idea of like, this is a thing I think would be really cool and helpful, the package maintenance working group is sort of exploring a lot of different things. And it's a really good way to have impact without necessarily having, like with the triage group, there is again, you can commit on your own level, but there's a little bit of commitment of like, I'm going to watch those repos and I'm going to, give some feedback in a timely manner and stuff like that. With the package maintenance working group, it's really like, we've got some initiatives, people open up issues, they drop off the map for 6 months, they come back and decide, okay, now I'm ready to push the issue. So it's like a really nice way to just participate in some of these ecosystem discussions.
You'd be really surprised how easy it is to get involved in some of these projects. Like Node Fetch, if you've ever used that package, is looking for help. They're looking for essentially triagers and potentially maintainers. But we are at time. And I just want to say that I dropped
you, John.
links into the meeting issue. If you're a Maverick and you want to do something after this or later with a drink, and you want to buckle in for an interesting story, I dropped a link to Wes's talk. I think it's the right one, which kind of talks about the past and future of Express, which kicked off a lot of the triage stuff. It blew my mind, which is why I'm here. So if you're ever interested in watching it, I'd highly recommend it.
You flatter me. Thank you.
I mean, it's just a good story. Let's put it that way.
Well, so thank you all for your time. Good night. And we'll probably have to work out how to do the OpenJS logo and stuff for this at some point, Wes. All right. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, you let us know. We need to figure that out. I agree. Sorry to interrupt.
This is actually the wrong talk. I'm going to try to find the right one, but whatever. So goodbye, people.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.